Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Earthly Headlines. Today we're going to talk about population booms and old methods of recording population booms and supposedly new methods of population booms. So when I initially read this article, I thought, yeah, this is common sense to do it this way, to count the children as well as the adults and compare the ratios of adults to children in the population to check prehistoric population growth. But apparently that wasn't the case, and it was pretty enlightening. Even though it does seem, on paper, it seems pretty simple, it's pretty enlightening as well, just to see the state in which what is accepted and published in the scientific journals and what isn't, and the reasons for them. And it's not as sinister as some people think it is, although sometimes there are hidden agendas and people, trying to consolidate their influence and, they want to be right and all that. But this isn't the case. This is just, it's a logistical issue more than anything. But anyway, so research shows Southeast Asian population boom 4,000 years ago. I got this directly from the ANU website, the Australian National University website, but they got it from the actual, I think it was a science. I don't even want to say. I'll check it. I'll put the link in the description below. The researchers are from Australian National University anyway, so we'll just go with that. So they uncovered a previously unconfirmed population boom across Southeast Asia that occurred 4,000 years ago. So the new method of measuring prehistoric population growth is mainly what this video is about. What it does is it's not crazy. It's not mind-boggling or anything. So the new population measurement method utilizes human skeletal remains, including children. And because of that, they've been able to prove, it's been long speculated, but here they've actually got it in a written document now, that they were able to prove a significant rapid increase in growth across populations in Thailand, China, and Vietnam during the Neolithic and the Iron Age. Just as a visual, this is all of Southeast Asia, pretty much. This is Taiwan, and then Vietnam's down here, all the way. This is the South China Sea right here. Yeah, Thailand, and all up in here. So, what did all these have in common? Agriculture, probably. So let's continue. The population trend was consistent across samples taken from 15 locations. We saw huge population growth associated with the agricultural transition. Of course, all this is making sense. Is all adding up. Up until about 4,000 years ago, you have hunter-gatherer type populations. I don't think she means everybody was a hunter-gatherer, but there definitely wasn't widespread agriculture as there was 4,000 years and onward. Agricultural transition has been widely studied around the world, and we consistently see significant population growth as a result. Of course. I mean, that's kind of a given, right? Anytime a civilization adopts agriculture to a certain degree, you'll see a steady rise in population and a big rise in population. The reason these changes have never been quantified before is the tools used to measure prehistoric populations were all designed for Europe and the Americas, where archaeological conditions are different to Asia. In Europe and America, they had a different way of measuring what you would call burial grounds. Children are represented differently in those populations than in Asia. They didn't really count children, or they didn't represent them with the true numbers weren't represented, as opposed to in Asia, where infants and children are not only are they more represented, it's because their bodies preserve well in Asia for some reason. The scientist says the preservation isn't good. Small bones don't preserve well. Children are also thought to often be buried in a different cemetery to adults. So the method researchers used to measure populations excluded children because they didn't have accurate representation. So in Europe and the Americas, they just threw children. This is prehistoric populations. Prehistoric. This is not anything after. So keep that in mind. They didn't have accurate representation, so they're just like, we're not going to chance it. Let's just count adults, and they went from there. Doesn't mean their numbers were completely inaccurate. They still have a pretty good ballpark measurement of the populations in Europe. But having children included is a huge chunk of data that's significant enough to give you, or give the researchers a clearer basically a better resolution, a clearer image of, and a more true representative image of not only the current population but the generations afterwards. Ms. McFadden's method for determining the rate of natural population increase takes into account the proportion of infants and children compared to the total population. See, this is, when I read this, I'm like, yeah, this makes total sense. They weren't doing this already? I had no idea that this was an issue. This way, researchers were able to bring population growth figures in line with other archaeological evidence in the region, which suggested a rapid rise. Basically, they take other archaeological evidence like children's maybe clothing or whatever tools that is in the archaeological record, and then this kind of helps supplement that data. And in this case, the data suggests a rapid rise in population, which makes sense because of the aforementioned boom in agriculture. For some reason, in Southeast Asia and the Pacific, there's good preservation of bones from children. The skeletal evidence was there. We were seeing populations with huge numbers of infants and children compared to the adult populations, which then suggests it was a growing population at that time, but the existing tools weren't detecting that growth. The trends the new tool found align perfectly with what researchers expect to see in response to agriculture. I tried to do some extra research into this and see, well, is there a different method specifically? Like, is there a new technology? They use the word tool. I didn't find anything specific aside from like radiocarbon dating techniques, but I don't think that's what they were talking about. So I think this is more of, I think the more accurate word would be like an approach to attempting to date prehistoric populations. Maybe they did try it this way. I have to assume that they tried it this way in the Americas and Europe. Maybe they just didn't think it was worth it just because of how ill-preserved children remains are. What do you guys think? Did you guys know about this too? Are you guys in the same boat as me? Does it sound like, does it sound obvious and common sense to you to do it this way? I mean, it does to me. I mean, it not only does it give a more accurate number, a population number, but it probably will open doors to other lines of research that focus specifically on the younger generation during that time, as well as the generations right after, or the subsequent generations in population. And it'd probably give more data to plug into, to make more graphs, more provide more clues, like I said, into other avenues of research related to populations of that time period. I mean, I'm all for that. The more data there is to analyze, the more closer we can get to the truth, essentially, to, or at least a clearer detail of what it was like to live in that time and what it must have been like for the people living at that time. It seems to me in Southeast Asia during that time, it was pretty prosperous. I mean, if there are a lot of children that outnumber the parents, that means there's a net positive of population growth, which means there must have been some sort of prosperity. So agriculture, in that sense, was a good move. The problem, of course, with agriculture is human nature, right? Like territorialism, getting taxed, consolidating power, and subjugating a certain class of people, and all that stuff. That could be argued in a different video, I guess. Not my video, but in a different video on YouTube, I'm sure. So let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys later.